Good afternoon, good morning to those of you that are joining us from the US. Welcome to the second of Travalyst Global Digital Seminar. We had a similar conversation for us here in the UK this morning, for those of you in the US yesterday, and we're very pleased to be welcoming in a really important group of US-based stakeholders into this conversation. My name is Sally Uren. I am the CEO of Forum for the Future. We are a sustainable development non-profit. We exist to try and accelerate progress towards sustainable development. But I'm here today in a different capacity. I'm also very privileged to be the independent chair of Travalyst Independent Advisory Board, and that's my connection with this wonderful initiative. And it's in that capacity that my role here today is to take you through a very packed agenda, 2 hours of panels, of online polling. So please bear with us. We would really like you to interact with the conversation. The idea behind the summit is to bring together stakeholders from across the industry to listen, to learn, to explore how Travalyst can really put communities at the centre of the Build Back Better within the tourism industry, and really understand how do we put sustainability at the heart of the recovery. We do have a full agenda. In a moment, we'll hear from the Duke of Sussex, who began Travalyst over a year ago now. We'll also hear from the Travalyst founding partners. They are my fellow panelists that you can see at the moment. We are then going to hear from a destination that has begun to recover. And this morning we focused on New Zealand. This afternoon we're focusing on Scotland. So we've got some really great examples of what's happening in a specific destination. And then we're going to move into a broader listen and learn, and we're going to hear from leaders within sustainable tourism and learn what they are doing to harness this moment and to explore the possibilities for building back better. So back to this moment in time. It's been quiet, hasn't it? Not a lot going on. Rather conversely, we obviously have found ourselves in a period of huge disruption. COVID-19 has and continues to have an incredible disruptive impact on our economy, on our society, and this is particularly hard felt in the travel and tourism industry. But with this disruption becomes an opportunity to harness this incredible change that's around us and to understand how might we rebuild back better, how might we address some of the issues that we knew were perhaps slowing down progress to sustainability, use this moment to actually address some of those issues. And when it comes to travel and tourism, there is such an opportunity right now to put sustainable tourism at the heart of the industry. So to really understand how by driving positive economic, environmental, cultural, social outcomes, can we really enable the industry to build back better? And in fact, sustainability could be key to the recovery, which leads us to really the timeliness of today's conversation, because what the industry does right now has never mattered more. So that's the context for the discussion today. Just before I hand over to the Duke of Sussex, I just wanted to share some of the pre-survey results. Some of you will have participated in this questionnaire ahead of time. And the results are a great foundation from which to springboard today's conversation. 80% of respondents say that their organisations are looking at how they can rebuild with sustainability as their focus, at 80%. It was 90% this morning. 80% is still pretty good in my book. And there are a number of things that we asked that would make tourism resilient in the future. And 60% of respondents said that the one thing that mattered the most was ensuring a positive relationship with locals and tourists by including the local community in tourism operations decisions and in the economy. So a great platform from which to springboard into today's conversation. And without further ado, I'd like to hand over to the Duke of Sussex.
Thank you. Thanks, Sally. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody, wherever you are in the world. And thank you for joining us. I really hope that you and your families are keeping safe and well during these uncertain times. And my hope is that this gathering will help us all affect the change that we've been working towards and that is needed now more than ever. As Sally touched on there, we launched the non-profit Travalyst last year to take sustainable tourism out of its niche and into the mainstream, to protect destinations, to support and empower communities, and to safeguard critical ecosystems and the wildlife and people that depend on them. Since then, none of us here could have predicted the global shock and impact that COVID-19 is having on the world, especially on the travel and on travel itself and the local communities who depend on tourism. Many of you joining us today rely on visitors for your livelihoods. Businesses are hurting significantly, and I've heard from some of you who are currently struggling to put food on your family's tables and make ends meet because there are no tourists and therefore no income. We must build back better. We need to build back better, but we need to build back ultimately much better than we did before. And that means there's a responsibility we cannot avoid or dismiss, for us to reshape this industry in a way that benefits everyone and everything for decades to come. I believe there is a way we can support the recovery, as well as leave behind better protected destinations, better funded social projects, and a less polluted environment for those that come after us. Travalyst wants to help. We are here to help, now and into the long term. And this is what today is all about, to listen, learn, and hear directly from you, a group of inspiring leaders that are responding to the crisis of COVID-19 whilst making every effort to maintain and even accelerate the high standards of sustainability you were pioneering before the pandemic. You're being part of this recovery and doing everything you can to help communities around the world bounce back is not a shift in your mission or in your values. This is your mission, and these are your values. I know it's not easy, but we all commend you. As many of you realized some time ago, destinations are under immense pressure. They're suffering significant damage, communities are struggling, habitats are being destroyed, and wildlife is being driven out, or worse, wiped out. We want to ensure that the industry that recovers is one that supports everyone fairly, and one that protects destinations, better supports local communities, and is truly resilient. Before the pandemic unfolded, we witnessed more and more young people expressing an interest in authentic travel experiences and an ability to partake in trips that are greener, that allow them to support local communities and uphold heritage and protect destinations and cultures. This is the future of travel, and a future that Travalyst is here to support and catalyze. Over the years, I've encountered countless passionate, determined, and talented people around the world who are dedicated to the well-being of their local communities. Their efforts ensure that tourism is the economic lifeblood of their region, while crucially protecting the local environment too. I'm really excited for you to hear from some of them today, as you will soon realize that you are far from being alone in this mission. Earlier this year, we hosted a summit in Scotland to begin exploring how we can drive forward a new model of tourism. What stood out was the need for a model that brings together all levels of the industry and actively champions the awe-inspiring work that's happening at the grassroots level. Travalyst brings to the table some of the largest global brands in the industry, and the summit today is deliberately focused on local voices. The struggles we face are shouldered together, and the solutions must be too. This is how we shape the future. There is a long road to recovery ahead, we all know this, but this is undoubtedly an opportunity for us to work together and to build back better. As we approach the work ahead, let us not forget that our humanity is defined as much by what makes us unique, our cultures, our beliefs, experiences, and the environments around us, as it is by our shared values, our desire to make our communities better, our compassion for our friends, for our family and neighbors, our hope for each of us to be safe and healthy, prosperous and happy. It is in how we honor and cultivate this balance between the unique and the shared that we build mutual respect, foster empathy, and advance economic progress in a way that is just to each other and the world around us. In this, we all have a role to play, especially those of us who can harness a platform to help. So my hope for what happens after today is that all of us come together, online and off, to realize these goals. Before I hand back to Sally, just an enormous thank you to every single one of you for your years of dedication to what is right and what is important. We're really looking forward to hearing how we at Travalyst can work with you to put purpose together with profit, because the tourism industry and our planet can prosper when we work with communities at a grassroots level in reshaping the future. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your commitment. Sally, back over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. What a great setup for our first panel of this session. And this is a conversation with the founding partners of Travalyst. And we're going to hear in sequential order from Booking.com, Skyscanner, Trip.com Group, TripAdvisor and Visa. And I'll introduce each of the speakers in turn. And their task is to reflect on two questions. Why did they get involved in Travalyst, and what are they learning from the recovery? So a little bit of the backstory as to what it was about Travalyst that attracted these pioneering organizations, and what are they learning as we go through this crisis. So I'm going to invite first up to contribute to this discussion, Marianne Geibels, who is Director of Global Sustainability at Booking.com. Marianne.
Thank you, Sally. First of all, I'll leave the insights into the industry up to the panelists coming after me, because I know that they have really interesting data to share. I'm very happy that we are gathering here today to discuss this very important topic. Because at Booking, we want to make it easier for everyone to experience the world, but we understand that in order to do that, we have to make sure there's a world worth experiencing. And we've all seen the impact that the absence of travel had on, for example, the environment. It was actually a positive impact. We all of a sudden see clean canals in Venice and clear skies during lockdown in Chinese cities. But I think the stories on how local communities that rely on tourism industry struggle often remain untold. And the return of travel remains crucial to these local communities. We have been working on community-based tourism for many years in our Booking Booster program for entrepreneurs. And we talked to our partners recently around the world, and we see two main themes in their current needs. Training and education to ensure that they are ready when time comes and able to handle the implications of the increased needs around health and safety. So how do they make sure that when time comes, travelers come back and they are ready and know what to do? And the other thing is really important to them, to get online. Be visible on global platforms that consumers can use and find to book their travels and actually find these beautiful local entrepreneurs. You will hear from one of our partners, Keteka, later, and Kyle can tell you all about this, but what they are currently doing is that they see it's really key to supporting their local tour guides in Bolivia to get them online directly so that they feel empowered and more widely to travelers around the world. What they're also doing is they're providing sanitation supplies and support for local operators to have adequate virus protection. That is critical because this will prevent the return of tourism to a new wave of COVID to these vulnerable communities. I really look forward to learning more from them today. And this is also why Travalyst is so important to us. Doing all of this together, sharing our learnings and bringing the industry together around this is massively important. And as the Duke said, as we rebuild travel, finding the right balance between responsible growth and sustainable impact is key. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Thank you. We are going to move now to Joe McClintock. Joe McClintock, even, who is the Global Brand Director for Skyscanner.
Don't worry, sometimes I can't pronounce my own name. Thanks, Sally, much appreciated. And it's really awesome to hear from Marianne and the Duke. And I think, for Skyscanner, the reason we became part of Travalyst was first and foremost, it's part of our mission to lead the transformation to modern and sustainable travel. But actually, fundamentally, the collaboration of all our brands is probably the biggest in the world of its kind in travel and sustainability. And that brings with it the most amazing opportunity to support communities, to support other areas of the industry, and also to really invigorate demand once again, because we all know demand has completely been decimated through COVID-19. So for us, absolutely, we have a shared sense of purpose. We believe in the fact that together we can build things back better. One of the things I just wanted to err on and share with you just some of the more human side of what we've been learning in COVID-19. Very early on, our early findings, we set up multiple surveys of qualitative and quantitative data and behavioral analytics. And ultimately, we saw in the early stages that everything we're going through maps to the Kubler-Ross grief model. So everyone is in this little mode of shock, denial, anger, acceptance, and until we get to a level of new normal. And that's obviously having a huge impact on travellers making choices to return to travel, to have that confidence. And they all need different things to feel good about that. And the industry is required to respond to it. So it's such a complex set of variables that, you know, communities, airlines, accommodation providers, experiences, all of the different sectors within the travel industry are needing to be able to share with travellers to make sure that, you know, they can bring that demand back into their businesses. But the most beautiful thing is actually, yet despite all of this fear and these you know, dashed hopes of a trip away, everyone that we've surveyed has shown some level, and particularly towards environmental sustainability, but some level of feeling that they need to make more responsible and sustainable choices going forward. So that is a really positive sign that actually the people that are traveling and making those trips want to do it sustainably too. So the demand is definitely there. I'm going to hand back to you, Sally.
Thank you very much. And in fact, that last data point where you're picking up an increased interest in sustainability, responsible consumption, is actually mirrored across many different sectors. And I think is a positive indicator, not just for travel and tourism, but for the wider economy. Fun fact that at the beginning of lockdown, Google noticed a 4,500% increase in the number of times people Googled how to lead a sustainable lifestyle. So that tells you that this pandemic has really heightened our awareness of these issues, which is something to grab hold on as we think about the build back in travel and tourism. So thank you for that, Joe. I'm now going to go to the third founding partner, and we're going to hear from Kate Chong-Britton, who is a UK General Manager for Trip.com Group. Over to you, Kate.
Thank you, Sally, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here today. So one of the reasons we're part of the Travalyst Coalition is that travel is such an important force for good. It's what brings us together and breaks down barriers between us. And we, like all of you here today, want to rebuild the industry. We all know 2020 has been an incredibly challenging year. Trip.com Group, of course, has been affected by this. Over these past few months, we've united hotels, airlines, and other partners from all over the travel industry. And through that, we've secured refunds for over 10 million customers. But looking ahead, because Asia was the first continent to be hit by the virus, it is, of course, one of the first to really show signs of recovery. And in Asia, we're noticing some key trends, which we wanted to highlight to you today. So firstly, the booking window has shortened in favor of last-minute reservations. We are seeing that customers are nervous about the situation changing, with many wanting free cancellation policies. That's why we've introduced flexible, discounted product to enable travelers to change their plans without being charged. Naturally, we are seeing that people are very cautious with the health guidelines. That's why we're working closely with our partners to ensure hotels and airlines have strict safety measures in place. On our website and app, for example, we display a heart-shaped safety logo next to hotels that follow the WTTC safety guidelines. This gives the traveler peace of mind. We're also seeing our customers opting to travel in smaller groups with families or good friends. Encouragingly, we are seeing some strong signs of recovery in our flights business, specifically in China, South Korea, and Japan. And the domestic hotel market in some parts of Asia has almost recovered to pre-COVID levels. Also, we are seeing most growth in the younger generation. The majority of bookings over the last few months were from travelers in their teens and 20s. Finally, we've noticed that people want to book in advance. Take attractions, for example. We have worked with our partners to enable pre-booking. This means customers can reserve a selected day ahead of time, which enables our partners to have more control over visitor volumes. Having the ability to cap visitors means attractions are less crowded. This is welcomed by customers. And this ability to prevent over-tourism means we're starting to build back more sustainably. Clearly, different countries are opening up at different speeds, but this insight hopefully gives a glimpse of what to expect where you are. We're extremely proud to be part of the Travalyst mission. Trip.com Group has made some great progress from a sustainability perspective. We promoted less travel destinations in a bid to stop over-tourism. We've launched deforestation initiatives. We've encouraged the industry to reduce, reuse, recycle, and regenerate. But one good thing to come from COVID-19 is the opportunity to reset and look at more ways to build back better. Thank you. Thanks, Sally.
Thank you, Kate. And I made the same remark in the conversation we had earlier today when we heard from your colleague. It is just so brilliant to hear how parts of the industry are beginning to revitalise and hear that actually that is in a way that is compatible with sustainable development. And just super interesting to hear these changes in consumer preference. So a bit last minute, but want to pre-book and changing demographic. Definitely. But it's really heartening because Asia was the first part of the world to really have to get to grips with COVID. And it's just really illuminating to hear what's happening and what may be coming our way here in Europe and then in the US. So thank you for that. Great. So we are now going to hear from the fourth founding partner. We're going to hear from Fabrizio Orlando, who is a Senior Manager, Industry Relations Global. What a long job title you've got. And Fabrizio is here to represent TripAdvisor. Fabrizio, really curious to hear your reflections.
Thank you, Sally. Good afternoon, everyone in Europe, and good morning to everyone in the US. I think I want to echo what Marianne, Kate, and Joe said before. We're very, very happy to be here today, and I'm very happy to represent TripAdvisor today. I think that the key reason why we joined this coalition was the need for collective action as an industry. Since the first conversations with the Duke and his team with this coalition, we realized that we wanted to help consumers make informed decisions. We wanted to help operators identify ways to become more sustainable. And especially we want to make sure that to ensure that sustainable supply and demand can increase in tandem. This is why we felt that this collective, collaborative, consistent way of working would have been successful. I think Duke touched before on responsibility, and I think this is another reason why we wanted to join this coalition. We have a responsibility to try to protect our precious planet and also the communities for generations to come, not just now. And this is also why we decided to join Travalyst. When I think about what are the key findings for us from the recovery, I try to understand, try to think about putting in perspective for Travalyst as well. I think the key finding for us is that cleanliness is now more important than price for consumers. And I ask why this is important. It's not just about price versus cleanliness and safety in this moment, but it's also about how we can shift consumer mindset from cleanliness to another pivotal issue of our time, which is sustainability. We saw that all the properties on TripAdvisor that implemented our Travel Safe initiative had a 25% more CTR, click-through rate, which is huge if you think about it. And if we want to be able to switch consumer mindset from cleanliness to sustainability, it's going to be a big win for Travalyst as well. Another key finding is about what people want to do, how people want to travel today. We saw on TripAdvisor similar data what Kate was mentioning before. There's a growth in page views. People are using the platform more to search for the trips. There's a shorter booking window. But I think that the most interesting finding for me was that people have been locked in their places for so long that now they want to change the way in which they travel. They want to go in open spaces. They want to enjoy nature. They want to be outside. They're looking for accommodations that allow them to be outside and enjoy outdoor and open spaces. And also when it comes to activities, they want to cycle, they want to hike, they want to canoe, they want to do things outside. And I think, again, this can be very helpful and powerful for us because we could leverage this trend to disperse the benefit of tourism and also address, in some instances, the problem of over-tourism. And the third key finding that we have is about the increased consumer awareness of the economic impact of tourism. We're seeing that people are empathizing and sympathizing with our industry. Everyone in our industry, from the smallest big businesses to the big corporate, is suffering because of COVID-19. And we saw that consumers understood that. They're trying to understand how to spend their money. They're more aware of the way in which they're spending their money. And I think that if there is an opportunity in this pandemic, is exactly this. We can harness this new trend into a movement for responsible and impactful tourism. We can help businesses in understand and reset their businesses, putting sustainability and communities' needs first. They can rebuild embedding sustainable practices into their business model, which of course will support not just them as a differentiator. For instance, price is not the key anymore. There are other factors, cleanliness, maybe in the future, hopefully sustainability. So this can play as a differentiator, and especially, of course, support the long-term growth of our industry. Thank you, and back to you, Sally.
Thank you, Fabrizio. And it's really heartening, and you see it again in other sectors, this kind of increased desire to be with nature, to be outside. That can only be a good thing for protecting and enhancing our environment. So thank you very much. We are now going to go to our 5th founding partner and hear from Stacey Porfeller, who is the Vice President Social Impact at Visa. Over to you, Stacey. Oh, you're on.
Hi, Sally. Yeah, I saw that. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, so good to be back speaking with the Travalyst Coalition. Just to reaffirm the reason why Visa participates and is such a strong supporter is promoting seamless and frictionless travel experiences has always been a part of our business. And Travalyst, I think, represents this very clear opportunity to participate in an important initiative, not just because it aligns with our business, but it aligns with 2 key pillars of our social impact strategy: sustainability and small business growth and resilience. And so our focus really in our engagement with Travalyst has been aligning and focusing on the small business aspect of tourism and the travel industry, and really thinking now even more so than before, but about resilience and growth of small businesses, but we all need to start with recovery. So if we really look at what is happening, some of the trends, some of the things that we are seeing and learning, you know, I'd take one step back and say before COVID, small businesses were really faced with challenges looking for access to skills, how to have the business, the financial, and what becomes even more important now are digital skills to connect to customers and to promote their businesses. They're also looking for access to networks, and I think Travalyst is a great example of that, and other platform partners that can help them expand their businesses. And finally, financial tools. What we are seeing, you know, some data is pretty grim when we think about 43% of small businesses in one of our surveys said they had about 6 months worth of cash to continue their business. What we also find is particularly businesses that are owned by women or people of color are even more impacted, because often they started with less of a reserve of resources in starting their business. And often what we find is their businesses may have been more in high touch organizations and structures in hospitality and other kinds of businesses, which then really have to or require a rethinking of their operating model, the safety of their employees and their customer experience. So, you know, a much greater focus on that kind of rethinking of their business, how to better promote remote ordering, remote purchasing, and then touchless experiences within the standard footfall kind of experience. And then I just say real quickly, you know, where do we go forward from here, and really thinking about building stronger businesses. And just talk a little bit about our commitment. In June, we made a commitment to digitally enable 50 million small businesses around the world. We want to power that recovery, encouraging digital payments and just businesses that operate in a digital first environment. 2, we committed, made a 5-year, $200 million commitment through our foundation to support small business recovery around the world. And with that commitment, we're really focused on women's empowerment. So how do we help women business owners get better access to skills and tools and capital that they need? It was a challenge before, it becomes so much more important now. Two other points. One, we've built a small business hub on visa.com. So that is a place where small business owners around the world can go and find products, solutions, services, additional resources that can help them navigate. How do you get online? How do you have a social media presence? How do I create, longer, stickier relationships with my my customers who aren't coming in every day, right? How do I create a longer-term investment, longer-term relationship? And then finally, we are just launching what we are calling practicalbusinessskills.org. It is a multilingual. We're launching it in 5 languages: English, Spanish, French, soon in Arabic, and in simplified Chinese. And it's a set of online resources, videos, tools to help small businesses around the world. So a global resource another global resource we can make available. Thanks, Sally.
Thank you very much, Stacey. So we're coming to the end of this first conversation. I see that there are some questions coming into the Q&A. We will have time further on in this dialogue to go to the Q&A. So if there are questions, please pop them into the Q&A box and we'll do our best to answer a few of them. And the ones we don't get to, the team will undertake to answer them post this event. So do please use that Q&A function. And I guess just to sort of wrap this particular conversation up, I think what really strikes me is that you've all expressed the fact that you joined Travalyst because you recognise the need for collective action. The challenges that tourism face to convert to be sustainable are way bigger than one organisation can tackle alone. And so that need for collective action was a big stimulus for getting involved in this initiative. And that power of collective action, I guess, is just going to be even more important as we come through this crisis. And it's just so brilliant to hear that each of you as partners brings a different part of the jigsaw. So support for communities, digital technologies, access to experiences, and that between you all, there's a real possibility to harness this shift in consumer behaviour, really wanting to engage with nature, an understanding of the need for responsible consumption. And I think that it's going to be quite exciting, if not challenging. So thank you all very much for that. Really enjoyed the discussion. Before we move into our second panel, we promised you the prospect of an online poll, and so that is what we're going to do. So in a moment, the poll will appear on your screens. There we go. So we'd like all of you to answer this question. How has COVID-19 impacted your organisation's commitment to sustainable or responsible tourism? Has it increased your commitment? Is there no change? Has it decreased your commitment? Has it reduced your commitment? Those two seem quite similar to me, but we still get the picture. It's not increased. And is it not relevant? Because actually there isn't a sustainability focus. So this is where we just like to take a read of you all in the audience to see how COVID has affected your commitment to sustainable and responsible tourism. So we'll give this a moment for people to engage in the poll. So we've got half of the people that have voted, so don't be shy, put your tick in the box. This is a great way to understand the sentiment of all of you in our virtual room. So we'll just give it a couple more moments before we move on to focus in on Scotland. Just a few more moments. I'm hoping we're nearly ready to see the results. Yeah. I think we've heard from whoever's going to. Great. This is very heartening indeed. So 63% of you all in the audience have voted that COVID has increased your commitment to sustainability. 26% is no change, and very few are reporting a decreased commitment. which is really heartening because that is the strong platform from which to go forward, and a really nice segue into focusing on a destination. And so I'm now joined by a different set of panelists. Welcome. We are going to be honing in on Scotland, and we are going to be discussing how might a responsible tourism strategy aid the recovery of travel and tourism in Scotland. And we also want to highlight some of the impressive work that's happened in Scotland in terms of the sustainability commitments that were there before COVID, and to look at how this might go forward as we emerge from this crisis. So we are joined for this particular discussion by Malcolm Ruffhead, who's the CEO of Visit Scotland, Mark Tate from the Cairngorms Business Partnership, welcome. And then we have Chris Greenwood from also Visit Scotland, and then Zakia Malawi Gary, I did my best, who is joining us as the founder and CEO of Invisible Cities, a really marvellous case study that we're going to hear more from in a moment. So I'm going to go to Malcolm first, and it's nice to see you again, Malcolm. Obviously met you in real life, IRL, remember that, at the Scotland Summit back at the start of this year. Malcolm, can you give a brief overview of Visit Scotland and the work in general, and a sense of your ongoing commitment to responsible tourism prior to COVID-19 even, and what this pandemic is meaning to you as you go forward?
Okay, thanks very much, Sally. Nice to see you again. Welcome, everyone. Just a very brief description of Visit Scotland. It's the national tourism organisation in Scotland, made up of about 600 people. We have 5 directorates. We have the Events Directorate, which looks at business events, cultural events and sporting events, from big international world championships all the way down to regional, local events that are specific to the region. We also have a marketing team that looks at international marketing as well as domestic marketing. We have our insights team, which does continuous tracking and monitoring, data analysis, etc. You'll hear from Chris a little bit more about that in due course. We also have our industry development team, which delivers the quality assurance scheme that we have, and the various projects that were ongoing prior to COVID, such as the Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund, which really was looking at infrastructure needs, particularly in fragile communities around the country, because obviously we were concerned about happy about the number of visitors increasing across the country, but concerned that the infrastructure wasn't in place to actually accommodate that, to give the visitor and the local communities the experience that they were looking for. So we've spent up to £9 million over the last couple of years, and I'm delighted that programme will continue going forward because it delivers real value. We also have been working very, very closely with communities, and I know you're going to hear from Mark in his particular area. Has been, for me, an exemplar of best practice there. But what we've been trying to do with communities, I think, is to make sure that there's a continuous programme of engagement, because it's about understanding what it is that the communities are looking for, going at a pace that suits them, and also by listening to their requirements, you can actually come up with really innovative solutions. A very good example of that, I was talking to some of the islands off the west coast of Scotland, and of course they have particular issues around infrastructure and also are concerned about people coming on ferries, etc. And if someone came down with COVID, what would the response be to that? And they've created safe houses so that actually if someone was to become ill, hopefully not, they would actually be put up in a safe house, they would get tested, the local doctors would look after them, and the local community would actually do the shopping for them. So I think, you know, we don't always have one size fits all. And I think what we have to do going forward is to make sure that we go at a pace that suits the local community. And that's something that we have an ongoing programme of engagement with, and we'll continue to do that on the other side as well.
Great, thank you, Malcolm. And so your sector officially reopened on July the 15th. It'd be good to know, what is it that you might do differently to ensure that we do build back better and we address some of the challenges that I know you talked about earlier this year around over-tourism? What's your approach there?
I think we've already got quite a good set of building blocks to move off. So it will also be about looking for increased investment in the infrastructure. It's also accelerating some of the programs that exist. I think IT technology, has really come to the fore over the sort of last few months. And again, it's how do we make sure that the industry is geared up to utilise, as one of your speakers mentioned earlier, to utilise the digital platforms and the ability to get content out there that's reassuring. So there's a whole program that we're beginning to pull together. We call it Moment for Change, and it is about resetting, the whole of the industry. We're working with the Scottish Tourism Emergency Response Group, which has representatives from the Scottish Tourism Alliance, the enterprise agencies, Scottish Government, local authorities and ourselves, to come up with a cohesive plan that will actually take us through the next few months, hopefully out of the COVID period that we find ourselves in. We've been running a whole set of webinars in terms of best business practice, aimlessly taking best practice from around the world and then putting a wee tartan stamp on it. But I think that's what the whole purpose is actually to take best practice, share that, and move on.
Great, thank you. So we're going to move into our two case studies to bring to life what's happening in the region. And just before we hear from Mark from the Cairngorms Business Partnership, we've got a video to share with you. There's no end to the fun that we're engaging with this afternoon. So if I can ask the Travalyst team to launch the video from the Cairngorms Business Partnership, that would be fantastic. This is where everything is crossed, that the technology is on your side. Just bear with us. I think we are about to see something. Or not. That makes me think, Mark, we should come to you and I'll get some kind of smoke signal that will tell me whether or not we can run the video after we've had our little conversation. So Mark, welcome. Despite that your Cairngorms is a key part of the economy with a rural location, there must have been a lot of apprehension about reopening of tourism. And how have you managed that apprehension? How have you started to open up?
Yeah, thanks, Sally, and hello. Firstly, the Cairngorms Business Partnership, we're a member organisation, so we're both a chambers and a destination management organisation. And as soon as the crisis hit, really, we realised that one of the key things that we would have to do was to prepare to open in a way that would give confidence back to everybody. So initially, and this was way back in March, just at the beginning of the lockdown in the UK, we pulled together around 40 businesses from right across the national park, various sizes, from all sectors of the tourism industry. And also included the National Park Authority here, and we started that discussion about how we will reopen, because we knew we had to prepare. We didn't know when we were preparing for, but we knew it's really important to prepare. And and a number of things came out of that initial workshop, and we did a survey of our visitors to understand what their hopes and fears were about coming back, and we also did a survey of businesses to understand how quickly they could open and how quickly they could reach capacity to serve visitors when they were allowed to come back. We recognised very early on that the communities, and we've always known that communities are a huge part of the visitor experience here in the Cairngorms. You know, our visitors will come back 4 or 5 times a year sometimes, and they are part of the communities, and our communities are part of the visitor experience. So we knew that we would have to engage with communities, and you know, our mantra became that we wanted to open up in a way that gave confidence to communities, to employees, and to visitors, and in that order. And we thought about whether we would want to, you know, have a visitor charter and a business pledge. But what we got to is that one of the common messages that was around at the time was, we are all in this together. So we came up with a framework for everybody, for businesses, for communities, for employees, and for visitors. And just, we asked people to do 4 simple things, which was to know the guidelines, to plan ahead, and we did some things to enable people to do that, to be flexible, and to be kind. And we actually held open Zoom meetings like this to share that with not just businesses, but with communities and community councils and local officials, and then completely open sessions where we said to anybody, any member of the community, you know, come along. And it was ourselves and the National Park Authority hosted the sessions, and we invited people to come along and share their hopes and fears about reopening. And it was really interesting, actually, because in those conversations there wasn't actually too much fear about the virus. There was more fear about about making sure that we do open up better, that we do get a better handle on things like litter and irresponsible behaviour. So you know, the things that communities cared about were the things that businesses cared about too, and in fact the things that visitors cared about in the survey. In the survey that we did. So we pulled all that together, and you know, everybody needs a hashtag, so we had the hashtag Cairngorms together. And you know, the video that we were going to show was visitor facing, but it told our visitors that we missed them, that we were preparing to welcome them back, and we wanted to welcome them back. But it was as much a test of the community reaction to that video, because some destinations around the world we'd seen, you know, when anything was launched that was encouraging visitors to come back, there was an adverse reaction. Mm-hmm. And we had none of that, which gave us a lot of confidence in the work that we had done. Not everything has gone smoothly since reopening, of course, but you know, because of the relationship we've built with communities, we're working with them to overcome some of the hurdles, which have been, you know, pretty minor, and on the whole it's gone pretty smoothly.
Great. So Mark, I know it's been really early days in this process, but you're saying that the communities, because you'd engaged so actively with them, weren't feeling that apprehension of having visitors come back. How's it going? Are you pleased with the progress that is being made?
Well, it's early days. As you said, we opened up on the 15th of July, and the first couple of weeks have been, you know, the first thing is that, and we knew from our visitor survey that visitors wanted to come back, and visitors have come back, and so we've been very, very busy, but businesses have been really well prepared to welcome those visitors back, and that gives communities confidence. If the visitors come back and there are things for them to do, and mm-hmm. they can see that, you know, lots of businesses invited communities before reopening to show them the measures they put in place to keep everybody safe. So it's early days, so I wouldn't want to jinx it, but it is going really well. And what we're also seeing is lots more new visitors to the countryside, and others have talked about this before. So we're seeing lots of new visitors who are coming to the countryside, and you know, our job as a destination organisation is to help them do the right thing, to help mm-hmm. them be responsible, and to help them, you know, really contribute to our home.
And my last question, in terms of how you are ensuring that safe return and a return that really benefits local communities, what's the most important thing that you're doing differently now that perhaps you weren't doing before the COVID crisis? Or is it more of the same, but dialed up?
We are doing lots differently, and we're making sure that, you know, one of our 4 principles is plan ahead. So we're making sure that everybody has the right information to plan ahead. So, you know, through our website, visitcairngorms.com. We've established a status service, so everybody can see at a glance what's open, what's closed, what's partially open in terms of visitor experiences, and what measures might be in place that are different to they were before. And our partners at the National Park Authority have got a similar service that talks about the car parks, toilets, and we've had lots and lots of conversations about toilets over the last 4 months, as I'm sure lots of destinations have. So we're really working hard to make sure that everybody's got the right information that they need, so they can plan ahead, they can be flexible, and hopefully be kind.
Great, thank you, Mark. I don't think we're going to risk the video again, but what we will do as we send the links from this webinar is be sure to include the video, which will be a treat to look forward to. So thank you very much for that. Just like to turn to Chris now from Visit Scotland to just say a few words about this post-COVID consumer behaviour. Perhaps a more cautious consumer. We heard from Booking.com, much more interest in health and safety. How has COVID-19 changed what the visitor is expecting from Scotland?
I think what we found is the trends that we were seeing pre-COVID-19 have really kind of accelerated and developed. But what we have is we have this veneer of a consumer that is facing uncertainty about health, security, and also their own personal finances as well. So it's really trying to manage that. So what we're seeing is we're seeing many people traveling now with purpose. So from a sustainability perspective, a responsible tourism perspective, what we're finding is that people are wanting to recognize that travel has an impact. It has an impact on the environments, on communities, on the economy, and therefore they're looking to try and find destinations that are actually going to deliver, back in a cyclical way. The visitor is giving to the communities they're visiting. Also, the communities are providing those experiences to the visitor as well. So I think it's quite an interesting perspective that we've got, that these are uncertain times. We're trying to manage these within the frameworks that we have in place. But ultimately, I think we're in a very good place in the kind of delivery of responsible tourism and possibly reshaping tourism in the direction that it really needs to be going in.
Great. And thinking about that reshaping then, how do you think the tourism industry in Scotland may change in the longer term as a result of this crisis?
We've always been talking about kind of providing tourism, like delivering value for money. And, value for money doesn't mean a delivery of kind of, low value, cheap budgets. It's about delivering, experiences that the people want. Maybe it's a reforming of that and look at values for money and, sort of reflecting the collaboration that we get between different tourism providers, local communities, that, we can sort of see a reforming, a reshaping of tourism, so that on one end, you've got, say, volunteer tourism, and people can sort of pay back the impact that travel has by undertaking, environmental, ecological projects. But I mean that's kind of one end, one extreme, like volunteer tourism. But at the other, it's supporting local artisans, local food producers, and really kind of get into the regionality of the tourism experience as well. And of course, that will also then deliver on the other areas of trying to minimize seasonality, regionality, distribution. Everybody benefit. Mm-hmm. The actual impact is reduced too.
So you're feeling quite optimistic about the future?
I'm feeling very optimistic about responsible tourism. Obviously, we've got a long way to go within the environment that we're currently operating in. I think we have to really look to tourism businesses and supporting them in the short to medium term, just to be able to get through this current uncertainty.
Great, but being optimistic about the future is the first step in making an optimistic future.
It is.
Brilliant, thank you, Chris. So Zakia, thank you for waiting so patiently. Invisible Cities, as I understand it, is a tour guide company with a difference. Can you tell us a bit more about it, please?
Of course. So Invisible Cities is a social enterprise, and what we do is we train people who have had an experience of homelessness to become walking tour guides of their own city, with 2 locations in Scotland between Edinburgh and Glasgow. And I think a lot of that is the belief that I have, that cities belong to all of us, but at the same time a city is different whether you're an immigrant like me who moved to Scotland, or if you're someone who's a local and has lived all of their lives in Edinburgh, for example, or if you have maybe lived on the streets in Edinburgh. So our tours are designed by our guides themselves, so they are given a voice when too often people who have experienced homelessness, at least in my experience, the people that we work with will say, well, I felt invisible, I felt like my voice wasn't heard. So all of a sudden we give them a platform so they can tell their story in their own words. And we show and we raise awareness of our beautiful cities, but also some of the social issues that may exist. And we talk about homelessness and try to break down the stereotypes that exist around homelessness. And as a social enterprise, we reinvest 100% of our profit into either the training, development of our guides, helping them, supporting them in moving forward with whatever plans they may have for their lives. Or we organise community events. So in Edinburgh, we ran successfully a street barber campaign where we gave free haircuts and toiletries directly from the streets to rough sleepers, to street homeless, in particular because they may not be at a stage where they're ready to think about training or think about becoming a guide. So we combine the beautiful history and vibrant, atmosphere of our cities and welcome customers, but also try to create an honest conversation around what a city is like for us, and what a city is like for a tourist, and hopefully raise awareness along the way.
Great, thank you for that. And what is it you would say that kind of characterises the experience that your tour guides give a visitor that perhaps others don't?
I think, like Chris mentioned earlier, there is a real commitment from guests to want to do something that's local, that's impactful, and that's real. And I always say we try to target conscious travellers, consumers, and I would definitely put myself in that category of when I travel abroad, I want to see the real side of cities. Of course, you want to see the magic of a city like Edinburgh with Edinburgh Castle and the history and all of the things it brings, but you also meet people. And we focus a lot on that creating a relationship with a local person who maybe has had it hard and has had a difficult experience, definitely an experience that's different to the experience you are having in the city. And the feedback that we get on reviews and from customers is often that going on a tour with us is like going on a tour with a friend. And I think if you think that our guides who have loads of different experiences of maybe trauma, addiction, criminal justice, like loads of the reasons why they may have become homeless or consequences of homelessness, and you think that when they're a guide they can be your friend, then we've definitely won a little battle, because it means that ultimately we are all feeling connected and we're all feeling the same. And then it's wonderful to see customers coming to Scotland for the first time saying, yes, my friend Paul from Leith in Edinburgh, he taught me this and he taught me that. And I think so we fit the bill definitely for all of these conscious travellers, and they get to see firsthand the impact that their buying a tour has, because they see the guides and they see the confidence that they have, the knowledge that they have, so they kind of see the result of all our training with us. And it's an ongoing process, and guides are the best people to speak about it. The level of skills that they get and confidence. And I think people like to see that. They like to see where their money goes. And they definitely see it along the way, I guess, in a more obvious way with us than maybe other operators.
Thank you very much. What a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful initiative. Thank you for sharing that. We are nearly out of time to focus on Scotland. And so I just have one final question, and I don't mind who picks it up, but it's going to be a competition now. Who can unmute the quickest to get to this question? But the question is as follows. We've just heard how a wonderful social enterprise like Invisible City is both providing tourism benefits, but also, you know, is engaging a cohort of individuals in something really meaningful. How can social enterprises like Invisible Cities work more with the tourism industry to really help build back better? And whoever gets there first can take this question.
Can I say, I just want to say a really quick thing, and it was mentioned by everyone, I think, all together, is building bridges between all our organizations. And whether it's, you know, I think that's the most important thing, because a city and a country, a destination, is an experience, is holistic, it's a whole. And I think if we all work together in creating those bridges, you'll support, you know, whether it's Visit Scotland or hotels or at any step of the chain, will, you know, everybody in the chain has the power to support a social enterprise like mine, or similarly we can also work collaboratively with them. So I think a lot of that question, for me at least, is answered by collaboration.
Thank you, which is at the heart of the ethos behind Travalyst. Malcolm, did you want to have the final word?
I would just echo Zakia's thoughts there, and I think what we need to do is sit down, get together, and work our way through how that collaboration would look. I'm more than happy to do that, Zakia.
There we go. Real life collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Facilitated by our friend Zoom. Who knew Zoom could be so powerful? Thank you all very much. That was brilliant to hear what's happening in Scotland, and again, a cause for some optimism. And I love the values for money. So environmental value, social value, cultural value. It isn't just an economic story. And that's going to be key to how we rebuild across multiple sectors. So thank you all very much. As we move into the third conversation of our summit, we have another poll that we'd like to share with the audience. So if I might ask the Travalyst team to pop up the second poll, that would be really amazing. Thank you very much. So this is data gathering for all of us on the call today, particularly for the Travalyst team, but also for the partners and for Visit Scotland, because this will help us understand, you know, how do we really take the most of this opportunity to build back better. So the question is, do you feel you have the tools and information available to make sustainability a greater priority as you begin to build your business? Do you strongly agree with that sentiment? Do you sort of agree? You're ambivalent. You don't agree, nor do you disagree. You kind of disagree and you strongly disagree. So this just is get a temperature check on how well equipped do you feel to really put sustainability at the heart of your forward trajectory. And as before, we will give the audience a few moments to fill in the questionnaire. We've got half the audience that have voted, so let's just give it a few more seconds. Thank you, by the way, for participating in the live polling. This is making you work hard for your Zoom experience. We appreciate it. If we could perhaps close the poll. Yeah, it's slowing down. And see what the audience think. So, interesting, 20% strongly feel they have the tools and information. 47, they've got some tools. 11% ambivalent. And then a smaller number don't feel that they have the tools that they need, which is something we need to pay attention to. But I think it is heartening that we heard earlier that there is a real ambition to put sustainability at the heart of the recovery. and actually 67% feel that they have access to some of the tools that they need. So that is a really useful context to move into our third and final panel discussion of this afternoon or this morning. And this is our Listen and Learn session. And we are going to be hearing from experts in the field as to how can we rebuild tourism for a sustainable and balanced future. And this is where we will have time at the end of this discussion for a Q&A. So if you have any questions that you would like to pose, then we will pose them to this wonderful set of panelists. So we have Maria O'Connor, who is Head of PR and Storytelling for the Good Hotel Group. We have Kyle Wiggins, co-founder and CEO of Kateka, whom Marianne mentioned earlier. And then Sir Bu Ho Ro, Sir Bu Rok Ho, who is the Assistant Professor of the Department of Recreation, Park and Tourism Management, Penn State University, and founder of Rwanda Eco Tours, so knows a bit or two about sustainable tourism. You're very welcome. It's good to see you all here on the call today. What I'd like to do first, if I may, is just quickly invite you to introduce yourselves and your organisations, mindful that not everybody might know the detail behind your organisation. And Maria, if I may go to you in the first instance. Oh, Maria, I think, have you frozen? I think Maria has frozen.
Sorry about that. My worst fear has come through, and obviously I'm having internet problems on the day I'm on a virtual summit, so I'm so sorry. I will do my best to progress. I hope you can all hear me. Hi everyone, my name is Maria. I'm great. There's also a slight delay, so I'll try and crack on. So I'm head of PR for Good Hotel, and I'm also a social impact consultant. At Good Hotel, we say sleep good, which means our guests can expect a comfortable and authentic hospitality experience, but also do good at the same time. Good Hotel is a social business or social enterprise, as we call it here in the UK, which means we donate all our excess profit to education and training projects locally and internationally. We donate and we train local unemployed people in our hotels. We have a large hotel here in London, where I'm calling from, and one in Antigua de Guatemala, which is where our good story began. You can read more about this on our website. We're also nearly finished with a new hotel in Guatemala City, and we are currently working on various others in Europe. I am absolutely delighted to be involved in this important discussion today, and thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Maria. If we can move to Kyle next, tell us a bit more about Kateka, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Kyle Wiggins. I'm the co-founder CEO of Kateka, as was mentioned before. So at Kateka, we connect independent local guides and operators in emerging markets to the world's travelers through software specifically designed to meet the needs of those operators and in those markets. And we call that software Puente. Our company started out of my co-founder's Peace Corps experience, and as community economic development volunteers, we worked with rural and indigenous communities in Panama to help them build sustainable tourism operations, basically recognized that they were very vulnerable to being taken advantage of by large companies that were taking up to 90% of the revenue for every traveler that would enter the community. So we decided to start something on our own to try to help them be able to promote themselves and help enable the digital transformation that's necessary for guides and operators in emerging markets to be able to participate globally in the travel industry online.
Great, thank you. And Edwin, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Sure. Hello. Hello.
Edwin, yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
That's great. Yeah, thank you.
So just a little bit about who you are and your background would be great.
Thank you, Sandy. My name is Edwin Sabuhoro, and I'm assistant professor at Penn State University. But previously, I worked in Rwanda as a tourism ranger, a manager, and also business owner and operator, the tour operator. And then I left that and started community organization. And the idea behind that community-based tourism organization was to develop enterprises that help indigenous people around protected areas, particularly around the mountain gorillas, in a way to stop poaching and be able to help communities improve their livelihoods as an incentive for conservation. So where we had communities disrupt or even go in to kill national treasures of tourism, which are products of tourism, wildlife, and in this case, endangered species. And then we started research programs, we started education community organization, but particularly to educate communities and also give them incentives and provide resources that they need to improve their livelihoods as an incentive for conservation. And right now we're doing a little bit of research, trying to educate them and see how they can be interconnected with wildlife, natural resources, but also benefit from tourism. So bring them on the forefront, such that the private sector is not taking away all the benefits, but we have a portion that stays with the community, and that gives them incentive they need to protect the resources that they have. So the program, the organization is called Gorilla Guardians Village in Rwanda, that works to protect mountain gorillas around the Virungas.
Thank you, Edwin. What a hugely diverse array of perspectives I think we're going to hear from in this conversation. So my first question to you all is really the obvious one. How, and I'm assuming it has, but it might not have done, how, if at all, has COVID-19 shifted your organization's commitment to sustainability? And how are you going to use this moment in time to ensure that we build back better coming out of this pandemic? Maria, over to you first.
Thank you. Firstly, as we all know, being sustainable isn't just about your recycling policy. It is so much deeper than that. For us, our core sustainability commitment has been about ensuring our profits are reinvested in people and communities to help them into better circumstances. And training through our business so that they can get ahead and ignite their human potential. That's why we're particularly delighted by the rhetoric today, which is so much about local, about community. So our commitment to sustainability and building back better is still totally focused on that. But there are new issues to deal with and arguably even harder problems to solve. So we need to be so acutely aware of those new challenges as we reopen. Secondly, honestly, there's no two ways about it. COVID-19 has been and still is a massive challenge for us, especially being a relatively small group of hotels and the industry at large. Our hotels have been closed since the end of March, which has meant we've had to make some really difficult decisions for the business. Certain projects have had to be paused whilst we focus on just restabilizing and making sure that our teams are happy and of course healthy. COVID-19 shifted us so much to look more inward and spend a lot of time on building and holding morale and supporting each other. However, most importantly, we've been thinking about our operations to ensure that we're keeping all our guests safe, because we know that is a top priority for our guests and it's a top priority of us for now. Of course, we're totally committed to continuing our social business model and directing our profits to our charity partners, but we need to have profits first. So, once we're stable again, we'll be looking to go above and beyond getting these fundamentals right. And for now, it's about restabilizing, protecting jobs, and ultimately, being a positive member of the community. So we're also just listening to our stakeholders and really understanding what is happening for our community at the moment. So doing what actually needs attention rather than what we think needs attention.
Great. And you said you were joining us from your hotel in London. That's now fully open? Is that right?
Oh, no, I'm joining from London, but no, we are reopening, but actually London, but actually our hotel in Guatemala, wonderfully, is opening this weekend. So get booking your hotel rooms in Antigua de Guatemala. And for London, we're hoping in the next couple of months, but things are just, yeah, we're taking things a day at a time, but our main priorities is get open, stay safe, and be good neighbours to our community as much as we can.
Thank you very much, Maria. Turning to Kyle now, then the same question. How has COVID shifted your organisational approach to sustainability, and what might you do differently to ensure that we build back better?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. I'd say there's no doubt that the pandemic has had a crippling effect on our operations and our fundraising efforts, and for those of all of our partners in the emerging markets that we work in. But that being said, we also recognize that there's an enormous opportunity to achieve widespread digital transformation throughout those emerging markets. So, with a lot of the operators and guides that we work with, a lot of them are still using pen and paper. They're really not connected, right, to the global distribution systems that can help them to manage their businesses effectively and efficiently. And especially now that we're looking at a post-COVID world, right, where digital transformation is going to be more important than ever. So typically the challenge is when you are trying to enact this type of change and operational change, these challenges come. The challenges are strong because a lot of companies and operators are trying to run their businesses at the same time as learn and adopt new ways of working. And where we see the enormous opportunity is that because their operations are down currently, it provides this space to actually enact that digital transformation and that behavior change and operations change. And that's where we now decided to focus 100% of our effort and time on helping operators and guides in emerging markets who we think are the most vulnerable to being wiped out after this because of their lack of resources, helping them to get those resources up, helping them to get plugged in to the digital world, and helping them to be able to recover much better than they would otherwise. So I think Marianne mentioned that we were piloting a project with Supportive Booking in southern Bolivia. And Bolivia, as everyone knows, is one of the poorest countries in the world. They're estimated to lose probably $1.1 billion in tourism revenue this year, which is about 52% of their projected revenue for 2020. Whereas the uni salt flats in southern Bolivia have been becoming increasingly popular over the last decade, where I think a decade ago they had 100,000, or they had just a few thousand visitors, per year, and now they're having hundreds of thousands of visitors per year in 2019. And this is an area that's extremely vulnerable, like I said, to with a lot of the people who work there being wiped out, right, if they're not able to adapt to new ways of working. So for us, our focus is on helping them to do that, and then also just trying to do as much as possible in terms of helping them, get the first wave of materials that they're going to need to open for domestic travelers, right? That may come, by the end of this year or, in the Q1 of next year. Our whole focus essentially is on propping up our partners in all of these markets and just getting them ready for when travel returns.
Great, thank you, Kyle. Sobering statistic there from Bolivia. I hadn't realized the dependency of the economy on tourism. So highlighting the real imperative to engage and support communities. Edwin, turning to you, I'm imagining you might answer this question from the perspective of being the founder of Rwanda Eco Tours, but I really don't mind. But I'm really curious to know, as someone that has been in this space, how do you see COVID-19 shifting either your organization's approach to sustainability, or how has it shifted what you might see as a broader view of sustainable tourism? So if you could comment from either perspective, either your own organization or from your perspective as a sort of broader actor in this space.
Thank you very much, Sally. What we are seeing mostly in Africa, I would say communities around protected areas that are heavily dependent on tourism. So that shift away from that has impacted significantly these communities. And most of what you're trying to see is to avoid that space of them going back into a destructive mode as a way to sustain their livelihoods. So what you're trying to do now is to increase conservation education so that communities understand that even with this pandemic, there is an intertwinement of our health, the global planet, and also what we are seeing happening now in regards to COVID-19. So what we're doing mostly is to use this as a catalyst to recognize, to appreciate, and also send out conservation education messages. But also what you're doing is to continue to conserve biodiversity, increase initiatives, and make further commitments, because now is the time that we are seeing communities away from the economic model of saying, if there is no incentive, then I don't take part in this. But what we are seeing now is a wave that is bringing further commitments where communities are stepping in to protect their resource, even without the economic model. As hard as it is, we are seeing also the social dynamic of that model coming in, of this is part of our culture, this is part of our heritage, and we can't let it go. So, and at the grassroots level, the idea is to increase partnerships, like my colleagues have highlighted that, to collaborate, to seek further networks. And this is the important opportunity moment where private sector, education institutions, volunteers, integrated conservation and development organizations, even individuals are coming on board to say, what can we do? How can we be part of this? How can we contribute? And that has helped to bring people together, to look at the challenges that we are facing through this pandemic, to see it as our own, not the communities there on the ground, not parks and protected areas in Africa, but us all. So we are now reevaluating, examining these models, community-based tourism enterprises, looking at ecosystem services, but also the parks and people model. Can it survive outside the economic models? So as we try to engage to provide reassurance that as tourism bounces back, do communities have all they need to be able to participate, and even better, to take this across the eye. So we building capacity, getting some training, mobilizing those resources, and giving them a platform where they know now they're in control of their resource. That is not looking at gazing for tourists, when are they going to come, but looking at what they have and how they can protect that. And I think these collaborations that we see here and partnerships are going to help us to make sure that these resources are protected.
Thank you. I was very curious to hear you mention nature-based solutions just then. Obviously, more broadly, a lot of attention on nature-based solutions as a way of building community resilience, but also tackling our climate emergency and also tackling our biodiversity emergency. Could you just say a little bit more about how you're incorporating nature-based solutions into that community engagement? Where do nature-based solutions fit within this kind of build back better trajectory that you're describing?
Yeah, so what we are seeing now, what's happening is that the communities are coming back, trying to rethink, reevaluate, and sit down together to come up with new initiatives that are going to switch or take away as we wait for tourism to bounce back, as we hope about that. But what is it that we can be doing right now to sustain our efforts? I'll give you an example. We had, for example, around volcanoes in Rwanda with the mountain gorillas. So most communities were developing products, arts and crafts, baskets to sell physically. But what we are seeing now with the volunteers and students through research are saying, how can we now position this on an online platform that people can buy these products even without coming there? So now these new initiatives, the communities are able to get money, some economic input, sell the craft, and contribute to conservation without even having tourists on the site. So these are some of the ideas, initiatives coming that are giving us a lot of reassurance that as we wait, as we plan, as we see all this and hopeful, there's already small scale initiatives, grassroots-based ideas coming up that are going to help us to protect resources, but also give the communities incentives to improve their livelihoods, to have food security, education security that they need to be able to take or partake in these kind of initiatives.
Great. wonderful story of ingenuity and enterprise. Thank you for expanding on that. Just to put a call out, we do have time to pose questions to our three panelists. So if you have any specific questions that you would like to pose to Edwin, Kyle or Maria, then please pop them in the chat. In the meantime, I'd just like to go back to Maria and Kyle. And in the same way that Edwin just shared a very specific example of community engagement as we kind of come out of this crisis, and in a way that in this case is, you know, maintaining a community even though there are no visitors. Just curious to know from both of you whether you've got your favorite example of how you're working with a community, ideally as we kind of move forward out of this crisis, but perhaps a favorite example from the past. And the reason for the question is that one of the motivations that really drove the Duke of Sussex to begin Travalyst was really this notion that actually tourism could work a lot harder for communities than it was currently, and that it was critical to see more value capture at local communities. So Travalyst is very interested in how tourism can really engage communities. So going to you first, Maria, do you have an example you could share with us?
Quite a few, but I mean, I will just say first, you know, we had to look to our own community first. You know, looking to our teams, our employees, our partners, and finding ways to ensure that, you know, they are supported as much as we possibly can during a time when, practically speaking, you know, we had near to zero cash flow coming into the business, and during a time when we were all emotionally struggling with this strange new world that we found ourselves in. You know, our CEO, almost to a fault, was working really hard in, you know, pushing us to still communicate and share, not just about the business, but in a human way, ensuring that we're all staying super informed of our individual experience as well as our collective experience, and supporting each other in a meaningful way. I think that was really important first. You know, alongside, we very quickly went to one of our charity partners, Niños de Guatemala, and supporting them. They obviously are a charity that provides education for over 500 kids in Guatemala. And we are a main partner of theirs. And so it was finding ways to help them with fundraising, help them with storytelling, sharing their you know, their problems with our online community, and raising awareness, you know, in a world where they weren't hitting headlines, even though they were in, you know, really difficult situations that's so much more complicated than what we were facing in London. Here in London, I'll just say that the main thing that we are doing right now is we are really listening. We're really listening to our local government, our local authorities, and really understanding what is happening and what the main issues are. You know, we are in one of the wealthiest cities in the world here, you know, in London, but that the borough is facing serious socioeconomic issues, and we feel we have a responsibility to help. So one thing that we know in the UK is that COVID-19 is really affecting young people, from a mental health and well-being perspective, but also in terms of their future employment and prospects. And so we are really interested in finding ways how we can, you know, continue to make our hotels a hub of support for our local communities, particularly how we can help young people and really tackle with this huge unemployment issue. So working with local government and experts on how best to do that.
Great, thank you, Maria. Kyle, may I come to you for an example?
Yeah, of course. Similarly, we have a lot of different examples of, you know, where we've seen this work on the ground really make a difference and make an impact. I think because my co-founder and I came out of development work with Peace Corps, we kind of have ingrained into our foundation this idea of not just seeing operators and guides in these emerging markets as customers or even stakeholders, but really seeing them as partners. And from the beginning, it's always been about making sure that they have the proper buy-in into and the proper input into anything that we're building, so that what we're building is actually sustainable. You know, so in the past, we've seen, you know, indigenous communities in Panama transform their communities from, you know, communities that don't do tourism at all to being able to leverage their natural resources in order to create local amazing community tours that became extremely popular. They went from, you know, only saving about $100 a year, right, as a community of 100 and something people, saving $100 to saving over $15,000, right, within 16 months of being in operations, and that's all from community tourism. We've also seen in Bolivia, for example, with some of the operators that we work with, we have one operator that went from doing $0 in online sales, only depending on foot traffic, to being able to do over $20,000 a month in online sales within a year and a half of working with us. And that's before COVID, right? And now that now that COVID has happened, one of the things that we've been doing, again, is kind of going back to those values and those roots of saying, okay, we want to build solutions and we want to be able to help all of our partners get out of this situation and build back better. And the way we're going to do that is going to be collaboratively. Obviously, we need collaboration outside of just our organization with organizations like Travalyst, organizations like Booking.com, and some of our investors. But at the same time, we also need the collaboration of our partners that are on the ground that are actually experiencing this. So, the first thing we did about a month after COVID really struck was to go to our partners. We conducted over 300 interviews with local operators and guides throughout Latin America that we've been working with, just to find out, what are they doing? How are they doing? Right? What are they doing? How are they viewing the pandemic? And how are they viewing their businesses and themselves? Right? What's their path forward? And then to start to talk to them about, some of the things that we see and see if we can get their help. You'd be surprised at how well versed they are in terms of helping us to develop the right types of technology, that will help them to get connected, mm-hmm. right? They can tell you, that they use WhatsApp more than email, or that they use Facebook Messenger often even to be able to communicate with clients or travelers. So what we've done is really try to involve them in the process of creating solutions. And we think that that's not only going to be the sustainable way forward, but it's going to be scalable, and it's going to be profitable for every stakeholder that's involved.
Great, thank you, Carl. And I'm going to stick with you, if I may, because we have had a question that relates to both what you've just shared, but what you said earlier, which was how you're using digital tools as a way of, engaging with your community. How easy has that been to upskill businesses in the use of these digital tools? And I guess critically, what is some learning that you can share with others in the conversation today that might also want to think of accelerating that digital access as a means of, really building the recovery?
Yeah. So I think it's been, it's of course challenging, right? I think and I don't think it's unique to operators and guides in emerging markets. I think that's for anyone, even for us who are running our business, and we consider ourselves very digitally savvy. But when you're trying to change the way of working and change the way that your business operates, nobody likes change, right? So it's a hard thing to do. At the same time, I think it's a unique challenge with emerging markets, because of just the types of resources that are available in each area that we're working in. But one thing we see is we try to find the common trends, right, among how do people, for example, how do people that we work with, how do our partners typically communicate with us, right? And how do they typically communicate with their clients? And we try to build tools around those those behaviors that they're already doing, right? So whether that's making sure that anytime a tour that is booked, whether it's through our system or through their own websites, right, it's getting pushed via WhatsApp or it's getting pushed via Facebook Messenger, making sure that they can also interact with our systems, mm-hmm. Using those tools is something that's really important for us. And so we really focus on building tools that way. And I would say, I think that the other big thing is just going back to what I said before is having them involved, right? It's not us building in a silo and then trying to put something out and say, hey, try this, we think this will work for you. But it's more getting feedback from the partners that we already have, and saying, hey, does this work? How does this look? And right now, I think we're being optimistic about COVID, we're seeing that there's more of an opportunity for that now, right? People are less busy guiding tours and doing tours. And so, and we found that our partners are extremely eager to work with us on this, because they would like to see solutions like this. They'd like to see resources like this.
Great, thank you very much. Edwin, there's been a question very specific to you, which is as follows. How has a balance been found in Rwanda between bringing in visitors, when obviously we were open to visitors, and to the gorilla habitat, and preserving and expanding that habitat? So how have you navigated bringing people into what is a really precious habitat, and ensured that the experience works for the visitors, but also doesn't endanger that quite sensitive habitat?
Thank you very much. Most of the gorilla experience in the region, particularly in the Virunga, and when you look at Rwanda in particular, this is a small space with highly endangered species, mountain gorillas. So what the country did was to do strategic planning, come up with a sustainable tourism master plan, and with that was to position that product as a high-end product. That means you limit the number of people coming to see the mountain gorillas, paying a higher price, but also using that price revenue to plow it back into conservation. And that's what the country did, was also to limit the number of people going to see the gorillas per day. So for each group, it can't exceed 8 people, for example. So 8 people paying a lot of money before COVID was $1,500 for an hour experience. So that brings in a lot of revenues for conservation, but also for the country in a way to educate not only the politician, but also the masses, in a way that you have a resource that's not only an economic revenue generator, but also attached to your culture. So the local communities and the private sector now came in to invest high-end resorts, high-end lodges, developing high-end skills, buying products from the communities around there. And that brought in a concerted effort of understanding the value of the resource. And because of that, the discussion that was there before was based on fighting poachers. So now it started to work, how can we work with the poachers as the stakeholders of conservation, not as poachers, but as managers, the owners, the beneficiaries of this park and the resource. And once that happened, then the conversation changed. So the conversation on the conservation of mountain gorilla became now centered around the communities, the benefits that they are bringing to the country, and coming all together on the table with development stakeholders on how can we integrate conservation and tourism. And with that now, that helped us to skew the numbers. Where the numbers were going down, the numbers now mountain gorillas are increasing. The challenge that came with COVID now is that the communities around most of these parks, as I said, are highly dependent on tourism. Now, without international tourism, now becomes the question of what do we do now? Because now the incentive is gone. What we are seeing most of the countries doing, and Rwanda in particular, is now changing into the domestic tourism, tapping into the domestic tourism, tapping into the regional tourism. How can we start to reduce the price to allow others to afford locally or regionally to come and see the gorillas? But 2, before that, it was highly centered on the conservation education. So the communities understand now that this COVID, this impact, will, as much as it's affecting them, it won't stay forever. So they know that they have a highly precious resource that needs to be conserved and protected, and they're willing to participate into that. So with the impacts of this that is affecting livelihoods, which is a huge challenge for now, because most of these livelihoods are household-based. So the community still wants to have food on their table, they want to feed their families, their children. So how do you deal with that? And that's where the alternatives are coming in to, again, look at new initiatives, look at agriculture, look at business enterprises to support that economic incentive base that has been there in tourism. And as we continue to build on this for better tomorrow, we are seeing that coming. The communities are assured of that, but also they know that the resource they have, they own it. And once tourism bounces back, they are going to benefit from it. And that's the essence of that.
Okay, thank you for that. You have inadvertently answered another question from the audience today, which was if there's no long haul for some time, how do we support destinations like Rwanda, but also, Kyle, like the destinations that you support that rely on long haul, higher spending international tourists? I don't know, Kyle, if you have a perspective on this too, in terms of if there's no long haul that brings in the international tourists that have got hefty wallets, how do we support those communities in the absence of those visitors? Do you have a perspective that
Yeah, sure. I could share, and I really like a lot of what Edwin said, and just in the thinking and the approach, right? Of, you know, the fact of the matter, and we've heard this, you know, in our talks with Booking and with a lot of the other, you know, big players and experts in the travel industry, is that no one's going to be able to say travel will return on this date, right? Or that we are going to be back, you know, full running, you know, by summer of 2021 or 2022. And so the focus really has to be just on continuing to build sustainability in the meantime. And I think it has to be about looking at the opportunities that we have. I think also, I think we all kind of agree that domestic travel will return before international travel. And so in that sense, everybody also recognizes the challenges with that, right? That international travelers tend to spend more money. The price points for a lot of local operators can be higher because, well, when they're dealing with international travelers, whereas local travelers are not going to be willing to spend the same amount of money. So I do think that businesses are going to have to alter themselves and change to adapt to domestic markets. And, you know, with a lot of our partners, we've seen that they're already planning on that and they're already doing that, thinking about what would be more interesting to, you know, the people within their own countries or the people within the neighboring countries, especially in South America, as opposed to thinking about necessarily the US or the European traveler in the meantime. And so that's another thing that we're trying to help with, just thinking about, you know, who will be traveling first, and how can we make sure that you're ready for them, at the same time as building towards being ready for when international travel comes back. Because the one thing I will say is I do believe international travel will come back. I don't think that people will never travel again. And maybe I'm just an optimist, but I believe that.
Yeah, I think I probably do. They can just travel much more sustainably. That is obviously what we're hoping. There is another question. We have two more questions actually that I'd like to pose to you. And this is for anybody. Do you think that post-COVID sustainable tourism development will have a negative impact on employment because of crowd control, carrying capacity considerations? And if you do, how do we mitigate against that? And just dive in if you've got some insights that you'd like to share. Kyle.
I can jump in, yeah, on something. I think it's a very fair question. You know, again, groups will be smaller, things will be spaced out more. What I am hoping is what some people have already mentioned, right? That there's also an opportunity now to solve for the issue of over tourism, right? In particular areas, right? So I'm a fan of the idea that, you know, destinations that were not previously popular will start to become more popular, and people will continue to try to spread out and find these destinations that aren't typically heavily trafficked, and try to go to places where they don't think there's going to be a lot of people. I would say the other thing to kind of support that is that a lot of the operators and guides that we work with, you know, the initial experiences that they put together and the products that they put together are really off the beaten path and amazingly beautiful. They end up getting sort of forced into doing the more mainstream things and typically lament the fact that they don't get to take travelers to the more off the beaten path places as much, just because there's not typically as much demand for it, right? So to run your business, you kind of still have to take people to the Eiffel Tower or whatever, or the Eiffel Tower of Bolivia. But I think that now there will, I don't know, but I think that there will be a shift in demand and preferences to go more off the beaten path and to go explore places that aren't typically explored. And I think that in that there will be more opportunities for jobs and employment.
So the pattern of employment is likely to change rather than the volume per se.
Yeah.
Maria, Edwin, anything to say on this one before we move to the last question?
I'm going to have to admit again that my internet has failed me, and it kind of skipped just through your answering the question, but it was about COVID-19 response more generally and responding to that. Was that about right?
It was the question of whether, Maria, my suggestion is, why don't you turn your video off for the moment, because that might just give us enough connectivity to repeat the question. But the question was really around whether or not COVID-19 might reduce employment prospects as we come out of this crisis. And if so, what are the mitigations? And Kyle was just talking about the actual employment per se might not change, but the pattern of employment might change in that there might be more willingness to go off the beaten track. So the employment is with guides that are willing and able to find that, nature-based experience. Did that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it is going to have a serious effect on the structure of our industry for a long time, I think. And it will force us to be creative and think differently on how we build our teams and how we shape our products and services. I mean, in terms of mitigating, I mean, I'm a big promoter of activism. Speak to your local stakeholders, speak to local government, find the people who are influential in your areas, in your regions, in your countries, and make the case that you need further support, you need further infrastructure. We're already seeing, the hospitality industry in the UK, doing a lot to ask for more support from our leaders, and I think we need to continue to do that. And I think countries, are aware of the fact that tourism is big money. It provides jobs, it provides cultural exchange. Hospitality is one of the most accessible industries in terms of it employs people at all levels, at all ages. It is very flexible and welcoming, and governments and local leaders would do well to support hospitality and travel more generally, because it's a wonderful vehicle for providing education, training, and cultural exchange. And so I would say activism, get involved, shout loud, and ask for support, because our local governments and our national governments will be rewarded for it.
Great, thank you. One final question that's come from the Q&A, and I'd like you all to answer it in a sharp fashion, so maybe a minute to answer this for each of you. But we have the big platforms listening to this conversation. You heard them at the beginning of the conversation. These are big players in the industry. What would be your message for them to take away to really encourage them to build back better and to maximize the chances of sustainability becoming the new mainstream? What's your message for the big players in the industry as we go forward? I have to say a polite message, but I'm assuming that goes without saying. But we have the ear of some very, very important and powerful players in the industry. What would you like them to take away from this conversation?
Okay, I probably would like to ruminate and try and make sure. I mean, obviously, all of this speakers had wonderful things to say at the start of this chat, and it's great that they're involved in this conversation, involved in this group, full stop. It's enormously encouraging. I would just say that to not treat all organizations equally, to try and find ways to see organizations more on an individual level. Don't compare good hotel to corporate hotel chains in the world, and we have different things to offer, and in return we should be supported in different ways. Obviously, given my background in communication, storytelling is important. Help these smaller organizations, grassroots, sustainable organizations, reward them with the power of your platform, and encourage them to collaborate with you on storytelling and getting getting their name out there, I think that would be an amazing way to continue to support sustainable travel.
That's very clear. Thank you very much, and said with passion. Edwin, what would your takeaway message be to the bigger players that are involved in this conversation today?
I would say mostly is support local grassroots organizations. Sometimes it's difficult for these organizations or community or local-based organizations to come up on the surface to tap into the potential, the existing potential and platforms that these organizations have. So having a way that, for example, Travalyst or any other can synchronize all that to be able to benefit some of these small-scale grassroots-based organizations that are struggling, that are trying, but they just need a tap on the shoulder to lift them up to be able to tap into these resources, available resources, or some other resources that we could develop. So working, partnering, collaborating, and developing networks with these community grassroots organizations, I think will have a great deal.
Thank you. I love the idea of being tapped on the shoulder and lifted up, all boats rising. Thank you very much for that, Edwin. Kyle, what's your take-home message?
Yeah, I think my take-home message is, you know, to listen and support us, really, and me, you know, and the other people like me that are still trying to do this work on the ground. I think we recognize that, you know, the large players, right, they have their own kind of large set of responsibilities within the travel industry, and are hard pressed to try to wade their way through this pandemic as well. But I would ask that, I think the big takeaway is that you've got to recognize that it's also extremely important that the work on the ground actually is getting done as well, and that we're not losing tons of small providers and small operators, because let's face it, I mean, travel is still an extremely fragmented, especially when you're looking at lodging, and especially when you're looking at tourism activities. It's an extremely fragmented industry and fragmented market. In that fragmentation, there's a lot of authenticity and amazingness that needs to be preserved. And if we don't pay attention to this, you know, by talking to us, by supporting us, then, you know, we're risking losing that and really changing the travel industry and tourism for the worse coming out of COVID. I think we have an amazing opportunity right now to really make things better. And I would just encourage the biggest, you know, all of your partners here to engage us. Email me, talk to me, you know.
There you go.
You know, talk to Maria, talk to Edwin. Like, I think that's extremely important right now, to just have conversations and collaborate. And
I think that the willingness is definitely there. And you know, I think what I take from that is, let's celebrate our heterogeneity, celebrate the diversity that we have in the world around us. Brilliant. Well, thank you all. You've been amazing. I feel very inspired by your stories and your commitment and your passion for the communities that you engage with, and your commitment to make sustainable tourism the big thing that we all pay attention to. So with that, we have got about 7 minutes left to run, and we are going to wake the audience up with our third poll. So if we could run the third poll, and then I'm going to try and summarize this discussion and invite a few words from the Travalyst Coalition in a moment. So, last and final poll to the audience. Do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Building back better must include sustainability to ensure the long-term survival of the travel and tourism industry. Do you strongly agree, somewhat agree? You're ambivalent, you neither agree or disagree. You disagree, you strongly disagree. And we would love your view. So if you wouldn't mind taking a moment, we would appreciate that. Okay, I think voting is slowing down, so let's take the mood of the moment and close the poll and see what people think. Well, that's a relief, because if people had said they disagree, then I would have been worried about the fact that we hadn't inspired you, because I, for one, think that the conversation this afternoon underlines in stark relief that actually building back better must include sustainability. And we've heard a very strong argument for that. So thank you all for that. In a moment, I'm going to introduce Heather Wong, who's the Executive Director of Travalyst. And Heather is going to say a few words about what next and where Travalyst is taking this conversation. But just to try and round off the conversation that we've had this afternoon, it's been amazing. It has felt like a journey, a little trip of its own. And it began with hearing from the founding partners that the reason they got involved with Travalyst because they saw this need for collective action, and that need for collective action is even stronger today as we move through this crisis than it was when Travalyst was initially conceived. And we've also heard it's really tough at the moment, really, really, really tough. And I guess what I've heard is that in some ways this is the worst of times. Need to look after for communities. There are redundancies. There are communities wondering about when tourism will come back. So it's definitely in some ways the worst of times. But then it's also perhaps the best of times, because there's been an opportunity to reflect, to think about how to train staff, how to reset. And I think what I take away from this conversation is there are definitely the conditions that we have right now that could make sustainable tourism the new normal. So we've heard about the fact that there are already active partnerships between industry and government and communities and tourists, and all of these different stakeholders are already working together, and that will need to continue as we move forward, and it's the bedrock for sustainable tourism. We've heard an understanding of connections, this kind of reinvigoration of connection with nature, and that actually the health of our natural ecosystems is linked with the health of our communities, which is linked with our broader economic health. We've heard about the fact that through this crisis, it's proven that you can shift mindset. So we are now really different in our attitude towards health and safety. How do we really think about that mindset shift that is going to need to accompany mainstream sustainable tourism? We've just done it. How do we continue that mindset shift journey? And we've heard about the fact that the bigger players in the industry really appreciate that wider responsibility. So for me, the conditions are there to mainstream sustainable tourism. And we've also heard of some fantastic ingredients that could make this happen. Ingenuity, imagination, digital transformation, very strong theme. Listening, the ability to really understand where communities are right now. Passion, creativity, diversity, really key ingredients. And then be vocal, use your voice to create change, embrace your inner activist. Thank you, Maria, for that. And then I think the ingredient that is super key is it's not about value for money, it's about values for money, environmental, societal, cultural, as well as economic. So the scene is set, I think, for, yes, tough times ahead, but times that actually could yield the mainstream of sustainable tourism. So with that, I'm going to ask Heather to say a few words about Travalyst. Heather, over to you.
Great. Let me just unmute there. Thank you so much, Sally, for that fantastic summary. I don't think any of us could have said it better than you just did. I just want, on behalf of all of us at Travalyst, I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us today. We are so grateful for such incredibly insightful and important conversations that need to be had, and we really think the timing for that is now. We will take everything that we've heard on board as we continue to develop how we use our platform and how to build a more sustainable and resilient future for tourism and communities alike. For more information about Travalyst and to sign up for our newsletter, please visit us at travalyst.org. And we would, of course, love to hear from you. So if you have more insights to share, or there are things that you feel as though we should be hearing about, please send us a note at info@travalyst.org. And last but not least, just so everyone can listen to this recording again and again, we will be able to circulate this to all of our participants, along with the helpful links that we heard from our partners today. And we look forward to following up with everyone who attended. Thank you again for your time, and back to you, Sally.
Thank you. Just a couple of final remarks from me. The first of all is thank you. 2 hours on a Zoom webinar is quite a commitment, and I can see that many of you have stayed through the long haul of this, and so we appreciate the fact that you took the time to be part of this conversation and participated so fulsomely. Thank you too to all of our panelists who appeared then disappeared but made enormously important contributions as that happened. So thank you to the panelists. And just one final thought to leave you with, and this is something we've very much learned through our work at Forum for the Future, and I hope will give you some cause for optimism and hope. The future isn't something that happens to us. Yes, we have black swan events like COVID, but actually the future is very much something that we can create. And what the tourism industry does right now, what you all do right now, will determine whether or not sustainable tourism can become the mainstream and how quickly that can happen. So the more attention we pay to sustainable tourism, the more likely it is to happen. So use your power, use your influence, use your position in this sector to really drive that change. So thank you all very much. Have a good rest of day. Thank you.